All right. Welcome. I don't know if this is a good idea that I'm doing this today or right now because I'm cramming it in. I don't really know if I have time, but I wanted to do one of these because I haven't done one of these in a long time. But it feels like in the broader TLC sphere, there's more things going on. They say that 5 times fast. TLC sphere, TLC sphere, TLC sphere, TLC sphere. Yeah, so I don't know how long I'll make this go. Yeah, no kidding. Slack. It's like the TLC Broadcasting Network actually coordinated this morning. Foxman, McMo, good to see you guys. Starting early, I did not. Did I? Well, I moved it up just because it fits. It fits in my window. I wish my windows were cleaner. Come on up. Come on up, McMo, clean some windows. So how to go about this? Folk versus academia. I have a video on my channel where I essentially read this small section of this interview with Tom Waits and Pitchfork magazine from 2006, I believe. Christian, Nathaniel, hey. And I went back and watched that again this morning, and it is just so good. It's just, Waits is a wizard. He's one of those guys. He's like a true genius. I don't know if people are really familiar with Tom Waits or necessarily like his music, but his music, number one, is pretty eclectic. It's all over the place, but the guy's just a wizard. He's a genius in the best sense, and he is a magician in the best sense with his usage of words and with his understanding of things. I think his broad understanding of reality, because he talks about in this article, a lot of it is about that everything is folk. And then he has a section, the quote that I love is like, the author says something like, so once you write it down, it's fiction. And Waits, because he says something right before it, I should just go find it. Right before he says it, or they're interacting, and he says, history works that way. Once you write something down, once you repeat something, it's never the same. The meaning is gone. And essentially what he's getting at is that all meaning is personal. And then the guy says, so once you write it down, it's fiction. And then Waite says, there is no such thing as nonfiction. There is no such thing as truth. He said, the people that do know aren't talking, and the people who don't have a clue won't shut up. And I really believe that this gets into my problem with broader academia, and this is what I was thinking about this morning that kind of inspired this that I want to talk about, is I kind of have, this came out on one of my live streams once, is I do have a little bit of a beef with academia. I live in this weird in-between world where I'm friends with a lot of academics. I'm friends with a lot of people with degrees. But I have a chemistry degree. That's my training. But and so like I went to school, but I didn't go to like academic humanities school, and I'm not really that well read and that widely read. And I'm kind of I'm classic for this corner. I'm an autodidact of sorts. I'm self-educated, and I broadly just dive into the technical aspects of information and any academic topic in order to make broader connecting points. I don't really like I don't get caught up in the technical stuff too much. It's even like it's just too left-brained. It's too spirit of geometry versus finesse. It's just not my temperament. It's like, even when it comes to God and theology, I call it theological engineering. And so I was thinking this morning is that I think there's some of my favorite frames and ways of thinking about things are Christ and Antichrist, or the Jesus verses, no one can serve two masters. He will love the one or hate the other. You cannot serve God and mammon. And mammon, I think, is people think of it as money, but really more fundamentally, more broadly, mammon is currency. It's a transaction. It's a game. You're using something for a, call it what you want, pragmatic, utilitarian. You have some perceived desired end, and then you are interacting with whatever it is, money, people, music, theology, whatever, in order to game a system so that you can get what you want. But the problem is that you don't know what you want. And by that I mean the true you. You don't actually know what's best for you. You just usually think you do. And often what's best for you is probably is a lot of times the opposite of what you're trying to get. And that's the danger in mammon, because God is that thing that is, I don't know. It's always beyond. That's a Clem Snide lyric, I think. God is that which lies forever just beyond the limit of what we think already seem to know. And it's that God is that which includes the unknown and the known, or it's the transcendent and the immanent, the seen and the unseen, the model and the reality, what's graspable and what's beyond being grasped. It's like this. I think, who said that? This was Guy, the wrestler, in his conversation with Paul. But he said, people think, and this is a conversation I've had with Cal, that just because you can't understand something, that it's ununderstandable. Or it's what I often say is deep calls to deep. And so, like, you may be interacting with somebody. This is why I love the Holy Fool tradition in the Eastern Church, or in the book Loris, is that, or I often think this with schizophrenics, or the line from Sturgill Simpson, Turtles All the Way Down, when he's talking about DMT, and he says, some think you might go crazy, but then again, it just might make you go sane, which is something that pro-psychedelic people talk about all the time with mushrooms or whatever. And that's true, because this is also what I talk about with the conservative temperament thing, is just order. A move toward order isn't always better, or what's understandable, or what's clear, or what's encapsulable. Sometimes the greater truth, or the move toward, and this is, I guess, the spiral. Like Tomberg talks about this in Meditations on the Tarot. The circle is the closed circle of the Ouroboros, which is trapped. You're trapped. Makes me think of what is it? True Detective, the first season, but that Nietzschean circle of being trapped in it. But the spiral is the death and resurrection, which allows you to go further up and further in, and infinitely circle the mystical center, that you are always angling towards. So there's a telos to it. It's not completely arbitrary and absurd, but you never quite approach it. It's for this process theism, but everything's that way. Knowing a person is that way. There is a fidelity and a harmony toward centering around the thing that you know and you don't know. And you can stay faithful to that. Like, if all of a sudden you just go off out here, like you've left fidelity to the person, or to the whatever, the infinitely transcendent thing, but you never, it's inexhaustible, and that's the truth of the spiral. And so, yeah, what I wrote in here is that folk is this acknowledgement that truth is, I think what folk is an acknowledgement that truth is fundamentally relational and personal, which gets into my personalist knowing. So, because folk is intrinsically a relational thing. It's just like you catch. Tom Waits talks about this in this article. Is like, you pick up something from somewhere and you don't know, and you remember it, and you maybe try to attribute it for a while, and you quote it. I mean, most of my Lucasms and things that I just spout off, like, often I'll attribute them to wherever I got them from, but then sometimes you forget. And this is how it works with planting seeds. You plant the seeds, God brings the harvest. So, like, seeds are planted all over the place. And then some of them take fruit. Some of them go into the ground and come forth and bear fruit. Some don't. Some lay dormant for a long time, and then they get picked up by a bird, and they get carried over there, and then they grow over there. That's how reality works. That's how your knowledge works. That's how your knowing works. And so that's the folk process. we are, and this is kind of my beef and why I have in the title, the systemic and systematic intellectual elitism, is that there is something, it's systemic. I put both of those in there, in that it's pervasive, I think, in the modern post-enlightenment world, is that we think that we have this, we treat knowledge and information and facts and definitions as if they're static objects, objective truth, right? It's this static thing. It's an absolute truth, unchanging, unbending, encapsulable thing that you can then take, and then you can like construct these different models of understanding, but nothing is that way. Folk is fluid. And that's the process. And so then you take this systemic thing in this post-enlightenment world, and then you try to systematize it, which is product of the machine, and the machine is the message, and part of that has to do with writing and being a predominantly written culture, which came out of Gutenberg and the printing press. And so like it's not arbitrary that a machine and a printing press and industrial revolution bred forth this machine kind of thinking and its systemic promulgation. But now we're coming back out of that, I think, with this new medium, because the identity of identity and non-identity, the opposite or the contrast is, it's like the Tao is always included in whatever you think it is. Oh, you think you're in order? Chaos is in here. And if you hyper order it, that chaos will blow out into this fluid movement where reality is always a coincidence of opposites, which I think all goes back to who said that? I forget right now. Lance told me about this. Shout out Lance. Folk stuff, but anyhow, he's a Western guy, actually. He's a Western intellectual, Western mystic, but I forget his name right now. So, and then my personal background is that, I've often said I'm half hillbilly and half redneck, and most of my family and people I grew up with and what I know is very blue collar or less than blue collar. I mean, I wouldn't even consider broad hillbilly stock that blue collar. And so, but yet I like philosophy. I like thinking. I dabble in it at times, but I don't like I've never been of the temperament or the personality to want to subject myself to the systems of academia. I've never wanted to play those games because I find them, corrupt, which is that all institutions are inherently demonic, that Tillich quote that I love. And that was my experience, is like which is what true education is about. I don't know. This is my intellectual enlightenment all centered around education. And I find the topic of education to just be infinitely generative. It's just such a fascinating thing. It was reading the Lewis Ransom trilogy, and then it was reading Abolition of Man, and then it was reading things like Mortimer Adler's How to Read a Book, and getting into classical education. But then again, the identity of identity and non-identity. As I pursued classical education, I rarely found the spirit that I wanted of classical education in any of these bodies that claim to be classical educators, which is also the thing that I often found in religion and church, although there is truth present in all those things. I mean, classical educators are educating classically in some sense, but they're also not in some sense. Or churches often do this. Like, this is where I love to quote Peter Rollins, where he says, psychoanalytically, I love to repeat Peter Rollins, but psychoanalytically, Rollins says that grace is the freedom from the libidinal pursuit of the lack. So the lack is the thing that promises to make you whole and complete. Whatever it is, fill in the blank. Whatever you think is going to make you whole and complete, that is the lack, the thing that you lack. And so, and the pursuit of that is often hell. And then grace is the freedom from that. But then Rollins says, is like most religious institutions nowadays, what are they doing? They're promising to fulfill your lack. Just pray this prayer, just do this altar call, just follow this liturgy, just say these magic words, do whatever, and then it'll fulfill your lack, the God-shaped hole. But that's taking God and turning him into mammon, which is what religious institutions love to do so that they can control and manipulate things and whatever. either for power or status or making money or influence or whatever. But then what you're doing is you're taking Christ and turning it into Antichrist. And so it's not that I guess that's my thing, is I'm not opposed to intellectualism. Or I'm not, no, that's probably wrong. I'm not opposed to the use of the intellect properly oriented, but I'm opposed to the Ouroboros use of the intellect, which is trapped in systematic machine thinking that is never properly oriented in the way that it should, which should always be oriented to what it doesn't currently see and understand, because that's where the growth is always happening. So I don't know. That's broadly it. I really do struggle with intellectuals. There are people in this little corner that are very intellectual and a lot better at that game than I am. Like Nate, we talk about that. Hopefully this weekend I think I'm gonna make it work, which I'm so excited. Shout out for the Grail Country this weekend. I'm gonna finally get to talk to Jordan Daniel Wood. I think so. And I don't know. I love that dude so much. I think from what I know and from what I've seen, he's a fantastic person, and I love his broader messages and what he's trying to get at in Maximus and all that stuff. And so I'm really excited about that. But both those guys are incredibly intellectual, and academically intellectual. They're the kinds of guys. They're not my term, like the smart dumb kind of systemic intellectuals that don't really. They're highly technical, but they also understand the more nuanced and what would you call it? Mystical or the faith-based mystical undergirding of academia and academics and intellectual pursuits. They both understand that really well, and so they're kind of the best of both worlds. But very often, even at that, like I get the intellectual, the deep myopia of like the technical facets of theology tend to get boring to me. They're not as fun. I want to play more. So all right, I'm gonna put a link out so people can play and talk, and then I'll go look at comments. I see my boy T-Grog is here. He's probably loving this. T-Grog, you're probably loving everything I'm saying. This is just like going to church, preaching to your choir. Am I not right, my friend? How back do we want to go? Neil, I'm an orator, not an orator. I'm just randomly selecting a spot. I'm probably an orator, not an orator. Would anyone hire a neurosurgeon who spoke this way? I hope so. Doesn't mean you could be a bad neurosurgeon. I would argue that the problem with the current medical world is that they've gone too far in thinking that they understand things. And this is part of my problem with interventionism, is that if you're not properly oriented to the spiral, you will constantly do all sorts of medical and scientific interventions that will create problems that are bigger and worse than the disease you're trying to cure, which arguably I'd say is what happened during COVID. And it's bad. It's bad news because it becomes an idol. Any truth becomes an idol. So, T-Grog, what up, my friend?
Hi, science defender here.
Yeah, I'm not opposed to science. I'm
Science
opposed to the
defender.
closed circle of scientism that is not open to what it doesn't see.
Well, I think some of your fans here might misinterpret what you're saying then, because the vibe I get is, science has got it all wrong, and it's the spiral and all this stuff. I just I'm very I I try to read more history than I used to.
Mm-hmm.
And you go back into the netherworld of medieval times and the Dark Ages, and this is the kind of crap that scholastics used to come up with.
Scholastics
And
is exactly the same kind of thing I'm talking about.
yeah, but yeah, or let's say, okay, you could say Kabbalists or mystical yogis or whatever you want to call it. it's we're kind of stuck with science. We live in a technological society. Without science, 90% of people that are around wouldn't even exist. So I don't see any alternative.
Science has allowed for the human population to be as large as it is right now. Is that what
Yeah,
you mean?
I'm kind of an advocate of weak scientism. In other
Mm.
words, that if there is a way to know things, the best way is probably the scientific way. Now, there's personal knowledge. Obviously, you know that you love your dog, or you know that you like cornflakes, or something like that. But as far as what's the universe made of? How does the universe operate? How can we figure out what's correct or what is incorrect? It seems to me that science is the only game in town because mystics, unfortunately, don't agree on anything.
The scientists do, huh?
Well, okay, I dropped this pen. It's going to accelerate towards the center of the Earth at 9.8 meters per second squared, per second per second. We can make predictions about what's going to happen. You can't do that by sitting in an armchair and just, thinking great thoughts or something. I'm very skeptical of a lot of philosophy, because you have great thinkers and they don't agree on things. And they're smart. Hegel was a very smart man. But, I mean, it's just incomprehensible stuff. Yeah. So
Do you think so? People often will talk about the right side of history. This is a term that I like. Well, I like this term, the exclusivist religion of the right side of history. And so you're essentially caging science as like a, I don't know, it's like it's a little bit of a, how would you say it? You remind me like of a Steven Pinker type who's just like, we get it now. Like we live in this great time that just gets it. But do you think that it's possible in 500 years we will look back at this current time and view that a lot of the current perspectives that science has as if it was like flat earther?
well, I would say this. I don't believe in a telos, okay, that history has a direction. Okay, the entire history of the human race could go tits up tomorrow. Okay, somebody pushes a couple of buttons in Russia or China or the United States, and that could be human extinction. So I don't know, but I could say this, that there's certain things in science, it'd be ludicrous to say that they're going to go away. The heart pumps blood, William Harvey. You think that in 500 years people won't believe that?
I think it just changes. Like I think that's just that because we live in a machine age and we've invented things like pumps, then I think we retroactively map onto a heart a pump, and that's just how we think of it now. But I don't think ancients thought that blood didn't circulate through the body and that the heart wasn't part of that.
I don't know about that. Um, I mean, ancients thought that many ancients, I believe, thought that people thought with their hearts. You know, the heart is deceitful above all things and desperately wicked. Who can know it?
Jeremiah 17:9.
Yeah.
Good verse.
So that's where's the brain? There's
Yeah,
no brain.
but like my understanding of the and Mills, I want you to get in here and
Yeah.
join some things. But my understanding of the heart is that because in Orthodox Christianity or in a lot of Catholicism or in ancient Jewish thought, the heart was just considered like the center of the person symbolically, which would include things like the intellect and the mind and everything else. It's just like the heart was the core of it. It wasn't like, I mean, they weren't thinking about it in terms of like the sign that the heart is the brain where your thoughts reside.
Well, it would be nice if, well, that's a technical argument for people who are Hebrew Bible scholars, I suppose. But I mean, look, a lot of people, ancient people, didn't know anything about the brain. They didn't have no idea what it was for or what it did. That's no shade on them, but we know more now. We know that epilepsy is not a result of demon possession. We know that. Unless you guys think
I'm
it
not
is a
confident.
result of demon possession. You don't think it's a result of demon possession, right? Epilepsy?
I don't pretend to know what's going on with any of those things. I know that it's not desired, and exactly what are the mechanisms. I mean, I don't tend to think of things in terms of like linear causal mechanisms either. So, hey, here we go.
Sure.
Chezi, get in here and talk to us about some Kabbalah. We were dunking on mystics and Kabbalists. So, Mills, what's up? I want to invite you into the conversation since you're here.
Sure.
Yeah, actually, I was trying to make a video this morning, but I ran out of storage space, so I can't like put the pieces together. But I've been reading some William James, and it's actually pretty synchronistic with this topic of dogmatism and literalism and science and these various topics here. Do you mind if I share a little passage
Yeah,
real
go
quick?
ahead, brother.
Okay, so this is from I think lecture 19 of Varieties of Religious Experience. And he's kind of proposing a science of religion. So he's going through all these different experiences associated with the religious sphere and everything, and finding some commonalities. And he proposes that we could eventually develop a science of this. And he says, I do not see why critical science of religions of this sort might not eventually command as general a public adhesion as is commanded by a physical science. Even the personally non-religious might accept its conclusion on trust, much as blind persons now accept the facts of optics. It might appear as foolish to refuse them. Yet, as the science of optics has to be fed in the first instance and continually verified later by facts experienced by seeing persons, so the science of religions would depend for its original material on facts of personal experience, and would have to square itself with personal experience through all its critical reconstructions. So he's kind of getting at the epistemic grounding of any science, that it's ultimately based on experience.
Well, that's the context in which it's ever embedded. It's like the way that I always frame that is like people talk about the hard problem of consciousness, but I talk about the hard problem of all perception. Is that like any measurement or science or like salience or what you're looking at, and then how to interpret that, and then what does that mean for you? None of that can be had without a person. None of it.
Definitely.
Well, I think that's trivially true. Obviously, if you're dead, you don't exist anymore. You won't be experiencing things, so you won't experience science, right?
Yeah.
So, okay. So, how does that help you understand the world?
Well, I think it has to do with our salience and what we're noticing. Because if we're just noticing mechanical causation and stuff in a very limited way that we can track and control, then we're missing out on a lot of the different relations that are there that we might be missing. And we might erroneously come to the conclusion that we've exhausted, for instance, what the heart is by saying, it pumps blood. And just the richness of the relations between things is more than we can ever really comprehend. Yeah, just getting down to what we notice and value is doesn't exhaust the thing.
Well, it
So-
depends on what you mean by exhaust. In other words, somebody has heart disease. We don't have to know the depths of the heart to treat heart disease. We don't have to know I guess the telos of the or the divine will of the heart to help people survive heart attacks.
you have to know what the heart is for.
Well, yeah, but science tells us what the heart's for.
Isn't that a telos?
Well, it's a telos in the well, if you look at causation, it would the only thing I would deny in causation is final causes. Okay. In other words, I don't think the heart was made by a disembodied mind to do certain things. Okay. It evolved.
I don't know if it was either.
Yeah, it evolved over time. Other creatures have hearts or circulatory systems or mechanisms to move fluids around. So I just don't know the point. In other words, well, we better not treat this heart disease because we don't really know what the telos of the heart is. See, we don't understand the depth. This is what I object to, the depth idea. There's some deep thing that nobody understands, and there's no way to test it. To me, it's an assertion without evidence. There's some deep meaning or some deep thing. Well, that's an assertion. Okay. It's just an assertion. It's like there's a deep meaning to this pen and nobody knows what it is. I mean, it's kind of it's a surrender in the attempt to find out things. It's like, well, it's very magical and we don't understand it. So, that's how I see it. I mean, I hope, please correct me.
Well, I don't think it should lead to resignation or inaction. I think it's more so just not closing off possibilities of discovering new aspects of things.
Well, of course,
Uh,
science would do that. Science is looking for what's going on. So I don't know why they would not want to pursue it.
I think the problem, I'm trying to make a more practical example, is like something like the case of COVID is like the problem is if you think there's a problem and there's a disease and you don't understand it fully, or you put faith that something is worse than it is, and then you go to enact a cure, and then a lot of times the remedies can be a lot worse than the problem you're even trying to fix, because like a lot of those things you just don't know the fact of. So like even with heart disease, something like that, for example, you can watch and observe a heart and know what a heart does, and then say something like heart disease is bad for you and it kills you. But then, and you can try to remedy that, I suppose. You could try to remedy that in many ways. You could try to remedy that with
Diet,
medications.
exercise.
Yeah,
Diet,
you could use prescription drugs.
Yeah, sure.
You could use a lot of different things, but
Sure.
but then all of that is kind of presupposing a lot of things, like not dying is good. Life is good.
Well, I think for most people, now I'm not speaking for everybody, if you're free from pain and you have significant relationships in your life and you enjoy yourself, then life would be worth living. But that's a hypothesis. Most people do not commit suicide. So I would say that most people think life has some degree of benefit for them. Yeah. So, yeah, I guess what I object to, I mean, it's just a thing I'm trying to puzzle out in my mind. Look, mystical experiences, I've never had one, so I don't know, but the idea that they put you into contact with some deeper level of reality that science does not understand is an assertion that I find extremely questionable. That's all. Now, if you can go to a mystical experience and pull up the winning lottery numbers for next Tuesday, that would be amazing. That would be fantastic. That would be proof.
So are you
Strong
more
evidence.
opposed? Are you more opposed to claims of mystical authority that then are imposed upon other people? Because if
Well, I
someone's
think
just claiming an experience for themselves
no,
and they want to,
yeah, that's fine. If they haven't experienced themselves, it's a personal experience. You know, I've had dreams where I spoke to dead relatives. I mean, okay, did I really speak to them? Maybe.
well, so
You
this would
know,
probably get into my systemic and systematic elitism, though. But you are of the belief that science is not whatever. I don't like the categories of subjective, objective in general, but you're of the belief that science is just like objectively true. And so
I would say,
science, the truths of science should those be imposed upon people for their own good? Or like where are the lines of scientific truth and how that is applied to people?
I would say that I'm a fallibilist. In other words, science can be wrong. Sure, it's a human enterprise. Of course, people are wrong. Uh,
How should
science
science be
gets
used?
say, well, science is compared to everything else our best method in figuring out what in the hell is going on in the world.
Okay, and then
And the
and
alternatives
and
are
so
not,
what?
uh,
I want to
well,
get past. I want to get it more practical in this rather than that. I hate Christian apologetics and like
yeah.
scientific
What
religious
the danger I
conversations.
see with mystical insights and things like that is people get harmed. It
So this
harms.
is like a Sam Harris thing. This is like a
Well,
harm
but I
human
don't.
flourishing.
Maybe I'm more of a Christian than some Christians, but I don't like to see people suffer unnecessarily. I don't. I don't like that. I think it's. I don't. I think it's sad.
Who would you imagine? Who would you imagine says besides like a sadist that they like to see people suffer unnecessarily?
Well, I would say very few people, fortunately, but
Yeah.
if you advocate for things that are harmful, um,
How would you define harm?
well, let's say dying of cancer, like lung cancer, cigarette smoking is harmful. Now, um, lying to people about your investment opportunities in multi-level marketing, that's harmful.
So harm, could I say this? Just tell me
Yeah,
if you think this is right. Is
sure.
harm something that uh, moves people toward death, non-being?
Well, at least suffering. Um, unnecessary suffering.
Yeah, the necessary thing. I don't know. Necessary is
Unnecessary.
always a tough word for me. Gavin, do you have stuff to say?
Sure.
I
Hey,
got all
Gavin.
kinds of things to say.
Hi,
Hey,
Mills.
K. Grog.
Yeah.
I just like listening too. So
Okay. Well,
yeah,
I
it's
just
an
didn't want-
interesting conversation though. The suffering bit. It seems that suffering is inevitable, and then
Well, that's true.
sometimes there's
there's a
suffering
truth
that
to
makes you stronger at the end too. Like it's kind of a tricky topic to just like use as your measuring stick.
So
Yeah.
when a dentist invented general anesthesia back in the 19th century, did he do a good thing or did he do a bad thing?
Oh man.
General anesthesia.
Yeah.
I have an interesting story where I asked my doctor if they would stick the thing down my throat into my stomach without putting me under because I wanted to be that guy. And yeah, endoscopy. So
Well,
You are
would
not
you?
muted.
Yeah. So, do you think general anesthesia was a good thing or a bad thing? That was a scientific invention, by the way.
yeah. There's that one, and then the other one's like watching, like you were talking about the dreams and I was thinking of Watson and Crick and the structure of the DNA and the story that one of them dreamed it, Like there's sometimes we encounter, it's like we're given knowledge. Sometimes it seems to come out of nowhere. Some people encounter that.
Yeah.
So that came to mind as well when you were talking about, this, if we can guess the lottery number, and it's almost like sometimes the same invention is discovered by a couple of people around the same time. It's interesting how it works out. And anyways, yeah, I was just kind of pushed back on two of those things, right? Two of your points, T. Grog.
Yeah, but I would say, generally speaking, if you have a dream about something, I wouldn't go to the bank and bet my house on it or something. I think that would probably be a bad idea.
So here's a quote
yeah.
that I love that I thought of the other day. That was because this came up. Well, necessary and unnecessary suffering came up in Nate's Grail's in the live stream on Saturday, and like, I don't know, we weren't able to go into it. The problem with some live streams and people coming in is like, it just, things are spiraling out of hand pretty quick, or not out of hand. It's just a different vibe. But like, I don't know that there is such a thing as unnecessary suffering, which I mean, it would take me a long time to flesh that out. I mean, it all gets into what do you mean by that, I guess, which is the lightsaber that Chad always talks about, or like the Jordan Peterson thing. What do you mean by that? It's the question that's gotten me in trouble for most of my life in like churches. What do you mean by that? But oh shoot, what was the other thing I was just gonna say? Like whether or not something is good or bad, I think really depends. Like that's something we've talked about quite a bit on this channel. Like one of my favorite conversations I've ever had in Grail Country was with Sherry and Jess, and it was in How to Walk on Water, where we start off by talking about the parable of the Chinese farmer. Which, are you familiar with that parable?
No.
So, and it's a really old parable, but it's essentially like, I could try to recap it quick, but it's like this: there's a father and son, and they go out and they're planning for a harvest, and then they have a horse and they're getting things really done well, and getting a lot of crops done, and then all of a sudden the horse.
Would you like me to read it to you?
Yeah, you could do it.
Once upon a time, there was a Chinese farmer whose horse ran away. That evening, all of his neighbors came around to commiserate. They said, "We are so sorry to hear your horse has run away. This is most unfortunate." The farmer said, "Maybe." The next day, the horse came back, bringing 7 wild horses with it. And in the evening, everybody came back and said, "Oh, isn't that lucky? What a great turn of events. You now have 8 horses." The farmer again said, "Maybe." The following day, his son tried to break one of the horses, and while riding it, he was thrown and broke his leg. The neighbors then said, "Oh dear, that's too bad." And the farmer responded, "Maybe." The next day, the conscription officer came around to conscript people into the army, and they rejected his son because he had a broken leg. Again, all the neighbors came around and said, "Isn't that great?" Again, he said, "Maybe." The whole process of nature. Okay, it keeps going.
Yeah.
Right.
So that's essentially, I mean, that's what I'm getting at, is like even your understanding of good and bad and judgments, like that's something we talk about a lot in the Little Corner. The difference between discernment and judgment is this absolute. We all have to make discernments. We all have to live our lives and choose between this or that, which, whatever, that's complicated too, because you're not, like, by the time you think you're choosing, you've already made the decision, which are like the Libet studies that happened like in the 60s or whatever that Rupert Sheldrake talks about. But you have to do those things in your life. The problem is then absolutizing them and concretizing them in ways that are incapable of, I would say, repentance, or you could say the coming into new evidence, perhaps.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So is suffering, Sherry says, this is exactly what I'd say. So is suffering necessary or unnecessary? Maybe. Is suffering good or bad? I mean, are you given birth? You don't, not even, as Gandalf says in Lord of the Rings, not even the wise can see all ends. You don't know. I mean, it's a posture of humility toward reality.
Well, I understand that, but in the Christian tradition, suffering is absent from heaven. So suffering, if heaven's the perfect place and there's no suffering, by extension, suffering is bad.
Well,
Okay.
this is why
if
is
suffering
where
is absent from heaven, then God has taken away suffering.
So T-Rog,
So,
these are the conversations I'm interested in you, because it's tell
Yeah.
me the God you don't believe in, I probably don't believe in him either.
Right.
Or tell me the heaven you don't believe in, I probably don't
Right.
believe in it either.
Right.
I don't know. So I don't know that heaven is necessarily devoid of suffering. The way that I generally conceive of things is that there's one reality, and this is a very orthodox understanding, and a lot of it has to do with our orientation and acceptance or rejection of that reality. So, like, if what happens to you, you're not constantly fighting against, are you suffering? They've actually done studies on this recently, like voluntarily entering into suffering and thinking that it's going to benefit you, like doing consistent exercise. Guess what that does? It actually makes you stronger and anti-fragile and better and increases your health. But if you are imposed a certain suffering like stress that you think is bad for you and is not doing you good, it will do things like give you cancer. So a lot of it has to do with your orientation toward it. So then to say something like heaven is absent of suffering, it depends on what you mean by that. I think the parousia, or the new heavens and the new earth, or the reconciliation of all things, however you want to, heaven, whatever, call it that. I mean, heaven is kind of a useless term anymore because it's been so abused, like hell. But like when things are made right, I would say from a Christian perspective, I don't know that the suffering's gone so much that people are rightly oriented toward what they maybe previously fought against.
Well, I think you could admit that that's a very idiosyncratic approach to
What I just said,
to Christianity. I mean,
I think
that's
that's
a
the
very
classic Orthodox Christian understanding of it. This is what I told you last time. I think most people reject not only a Latin Western tradition, but like this is broadly what I think happened. The East and the West is Cliff Notes. The East and the
Sure.
West split, and the Western Church was over here, and then you had the Protestant Reformation.
right.
And then you
Mhm.
go down like all these different branches of the Protestant Reformation where you end up in like a fundamentalist Southern Baptist. And that's the view of Christianity that most people in America think is like the standard view of Christianity. And it's it's not the best to choose from. If you're
Well,
picking and
okay.
choosing.
So how do you determine which
Can I toss in
is?
one thing?
Yeah, go ahead, please.
I just my mom died when I was young, and then I'm told, I'll see her again in heaven. So like, I think there's versions of Christianity that can be very helpful for people depending on where they're at. But
Yeah,
one person's
totally agree.
version of heaven, for example, will be helpful. Maybe it's helpful for the 3-year-old. And then there's another version of heaven that maybe you go and you study Judaism for 30 years. It's like I feel like there's different versions of it which are going to be helpful for you where you're at on your path, which means like you probably at the end you might not end up staying in that same place, the same kind of Christianity you found originally, something like that.
Completely, because when the student is ready, the teacher will appear, and what I often add on to that is because then you have eyes to see that you always knew it was there. You can see the teacher then. The teacher was always there saying it. You just couldn't see it before, and that's like essentially what Neil said here. The problems T-Grog is outlining very well, I might add.
Yeah,
I was not able to see through until I had a sufficient amount of suffering. That suffering was proof that my prior model was insufficient.
Yeah, and then so it's the best Christianity is going to be different for different people, right?
Yes.
And then as the person grows and changes, the best Christianity for that person is going to update as well, and that should happen over time too. Hopefully it changes as society changes. It should be emergent.
So you're putting these, do you know you're putting these in the private chat, or are you just asking us, or you want to put them out in the bigger, broader comments?
I don't care. I'll put them out
Okay.
wherever you guys want. I've never done this. I mean, this is my second
Okay.
time doing this, so I don't
No,
know.
for sure. I'm just asking. So,
No, I
because I
don't.
just don't want to like air out stuff that you're putting in the private chat.
No, yeah,
Um,
yeah. Look, am I for a more tolerant, nice version of Christianity? Yeah, of course. Yeah, that's great. Universalism, great. No hell, great. You know, yeah, that's great. It's like, yeah, sure, why not? But
There might be
you're
some
just
people that need a hell.
you're choosing, you know, you're making a choice. It's not based on, as far as I can see, arguments. You know, what did the Bible say? What did the church fathers say? What did, you know? It's yeah, sure, yeah, I'm all for it. But
so here's a quote. We got another. So what's funny is like I don't even like that may be totally true. Christianity will die out just like the other ancient religions. Nate and I were actually talking about that the other day. The way that I would say it is like the current model or institution or way of understanding Christianity may die out, but like Nate said it this way, and I think it's totally true, is that Christianity may die out, but like that would be the most Christian thing for Christianity to do.
I don't think it'll die out. It'll morph into other things. It's already doing that in the charismatic movement. You know, I hear Paul Vanderklein going, "How can we get people in church?" I said, "Speak in tongues, have healing services, jazz up the music. You'll pack them in. Pack them in. No problem. I'm an atheist. I'm telling you, what's popular is charismatic Christianity. That's what's popular. No doctrine, experience only, whatever, anything goes. Prosperity gospel, pack them in."
Isn't that all? But I mean, that all goes all these things again presume the question of what is good, what do you want, what is success. It's all bound in the context. This is why I say things like the person is the nexus and the locus of all meaning. Because is that a good thing? Because there are a lot of people you would say that like we're not going to appeal to popularism because, you know, I mean, like go talk to like a fundamentalist Christian and they'll
Right.
say like, is your goal to pack people in churches? Do you want to just be popular? And they say, no, we want to be truth. We want to defend the truth of the Bible and scripture
Right.
or whatever. Or like a lot of Orthodox people would say, do you want more people attending your churches? I mean, I think they would broadly say, sure, maybe. Like it kind of doesn't make much difference to us. Like we're doing the thing that we're doing.
Right.
And if people are attracted to that, great. And if they're
Right.
not, we're going to keep doing the thing we're doing. Mega churches are going to want more people for sure because they got to pay for those multi-million-dollar buildings, you know?
Yeah. I heard somebody talk about this the other day. I think it was, there's an ethicist at Harvard, and he said, look, here's how you can tell what you want in a society, or here's a heuristic. Construct a society, and you don't know where you're going to be in that society. You could be at the top, you could be at the bottom. Construct a society. And then, you know, that's a pragmatic way to see what kind of society you'd want to have.
I love that approach. I love saying, how would you build a city? How would you do it?
Well, if you think about it, I mean, look at the society we have today. We have oligarchs, billionaires, almost trillionaires, and people they can't get jobs. They are, you know, loaded with debt. It's you know, I mean, call me a relativist, but I don't see that that's a good thing. I think it's bad.
This is
I
where
agree with you.
I was trying to communicate with you in comments, and this is where I was pointing at, like, you know, how there can be people who are very self-centered, and I do that too, who can use the truth and their intellect for their own power and glory and fame at the expense of others. And to me, it seems like that's part of the argument of why I don't uphold truth as the highest, is because truth doesn't have anything to do with the well-being of people, right? So ideally you would have people who want what's best for people combined with an appreciation of truth. But when truth is divorced from care for people, it can go really bad. And so to me, I look at the world and that's what I see is kind of
Yes.
a pursuit of truth divorced from care for people. So it requires both. They're both important.
Yeah, I would say I would think I would broadly agree with that. But on the other hand, I don't like lying to people just to make them feel good.
What about lying if you think that it will justify the ends?
All there's a problem. It's Pandora's box. You know, what ends? Whose ends?
Yeah.
I'd be very leery of that. I got to take this call. My daughter's in Australia. Got to go, guys.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Bye bye.
Yeah. Thanks for coming, buddy.
Mills,
Mil,
you're very quiet.
Yeah. Yeah, sorry, I came on this kind of cold. Kind of bummed that my video didn't work out. Oh well.
So what?
But
you were just trying to make it, and it just like what? What happened?
I ran out of space on my phone.
Oh,
But,
okay.
Yeah, can't get it to hook up to my laptop either. But no, I was curious what he meant by suffering. I wanted to lightsaber that term quite a bit because
Yeah.
he's talking about, you know, the kind of suffering you'd have during a surgical procedure, which, yeah, we should do our best to ameliorate and minimize that, I think. But there's other kinds of suffering that are good for us, that if we defer it, we actually create a huge problem by repeatedly deferring it. And I think that's kind of at large what's going on in the world right now, because it creates these bigger and bigger problems because you're not going through the experience you need to, which necessarily entails some suffering in order to get the transformation.
Right. Right. Transformation, suffering for any sort of meaningful transformation to become who you probably most want to be at your core level. It's going to involve suffering, you know.
I think
Some sort.
the best argument for that the atheist will bring is like think about the child who gets cancer, you know. That's like, so there's a kind of suffering in that, and you know, infant mortality and longevity and quality of life. You know, to me, yeah, suffering needs to be there in order to do the learning and the transformation. But so I wouldn't want to get rid of suffering, but there's probably something like medicine, you know, being able to heal disease, cure disease, avoid disease. Like it would be nice.
But there's always so many things that we don't see, like even the suffering of a young child who dies early. Like their personhood is so connected to so many things. So again, to me, it's a very Chinese farmer thing. Like, is this good or is this bad? We'll see. What's the ultimate end of that child? I don't know.
Well, there's the all things can be used for good thing that I can see that. But I don't know if that means that we should just like not try to do good work, you know.
No.
Try to help participate in making, you know, being a better person and helping things become better.
No, right. Absolutely.
So both true.
Right. I think it's just sometimes there's wisdom there, and then you become, my concern with interventionism is always, like people say, behold the words you use. At first you start using them and then they start using you and you get captured, or like the medium is the message, you know. This is just the broad thing of how I think the devil or deception or whatever, like remove all the words that trigger you, I guess, like deception works by tricking you by pretending to be good. That's why it's deceiving. You know, and so like everybody barring the psychopaths are trying to do good, but then very often it ends up being for the bad, you know. And so that doesn't, I mean, this is my anarchist pitch, I guess. This is why I'm an anarchist. It's like because, and Jordan Peterson said this as much, which was his whole like take the log out of your eye thing, because he said, if you have a bunch of prescriptions for how to fix the world, start with yourself, clean your room, help your family, help your neighborhood. But like, if you want to get to the level where you want to start making prescriptions for the nation and the world, what if you're wrong? Start with yourself.
I just look at the ones that are doing it already. Like, I know I'm not perfect, but when I look at the ones who are already doing it, I'm like, it can't be that hard to do better than they're doing. So that's kind of, I talked to a construction worker the other day. He said, I'm not the best construction worker, but when I look and see the way people do the work, it's like, I can do better than that. It's not hard to do better than the ones who are doing terrible, who have no care. But
well, and you often want the people, this is why I like even the way that Paul runs TLC, or the way that like this little corner has worked, is because it's been a very organic, slow, emerging thing. Because very rarely, I don't know, I think it's both Lewis and Tolkien have one of these. I think it's Tolkien that says, because very, very often the person that you don't want running things is the person who wants to be running things. You know, like that's the person you don't want in charge. The person you probably most want in charge is the person who's going to fight you tooth and nail, that doesn't want to lead, you know, because because those people, I think, are the ones with intrinsically with humility, because they're just like, what do I know? How do I know how to fix things? But eventually there's like a cumulative mass where people, I think this is how it worked in smaller groups, where they were just like, no, you're the leader. We all know, we all recognize and acknowledge that you're the leader and you just need to lead. It's almost like forced communal, you know, what would you call it? Like elevation to the leadership position. And it's a very Christian idea, you know. Jesus is constantly saying stuff like that, you know. Don't go into a party and sit at the best spot. Sit at the low spot and wait to be elevated. You know, have somebody else elevate you. Don't elevate yourself. But like, I don't know. This is why I even worry. This will circle, but we'll circle all the way back to the title of this discussion. This is why I struggle with systemic or systematic elitism of academia, or even like YouTube with likes and status and everything else. Is like, or that video that Paul was playing of that YouTuber talking about how to like get the most followers and clicks in YouTube videos. That's all wired toward gaming the system so that you can elevate yourself. Fuck all that. Like, no way. I don't want any part of any of that, you know? Like, that's probably why I like Peter Rollins and pyrotheology, or pyro anything. Like, if I got popular at YouTube, like, I'd want to burn the thing to the ground. I'd want to like disappear and like go out in the woods.
call us bluff, folks. So
Yeah,
subscribe.
no.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that, you know, sort of get your own house in order thing is really important, because when you start to do something, I don't know, there's like an extended causation thing going on where spontaneously, like, others seem to kind of pick up on these things in a disconnected way, and then you kind of find each other, and then it kind of permeates through. And once you get your own thing in order, if you figure out how to, you know, I don't know, follow the Tao, if you want to use that metaphor,
Sure.
then it creates a resonance that people notice, and it has this implicit effect on all kind of stuff around you. And so it's not just all top down stuff.
No.
Like, these bottom up processes matter a lot.
Totally. And it allows for the other people to voluntarily, without coercion, do what they want to do. It's the, you know, it's like what I was talking about earlier. It's the planting of the seeds. It's not me telling you what to do. It's the very Jordan Peterson. Speak the truth as clearly as you can, with integrity, without lying, in as much as you're able, and then let the cards fall where they may. You know, it's the deep calls to deep, like resonances. You're not gonna hear what I'm saying or like what I'm saying if it's not salient to you. And if it's not salient to you, there's nothing I can do about that.
Hey, Luke, if you did become popular and you were to like burn it all down, would that be a selfish move, a self-centered move?
Potentially. Potentially. Yeah,
Right.
I don't know. And those are all things that I've struggled with. I mean, sometimes too. I mean, so that's an honest confessional thing. Here, I'll give you a confession of the right kind, I think. Um, I think a lot of times I have not leaned into areas where I could really improve, which is like being more structured, being more disciplined in terms of like academic rigor, because that's not my natural inclination and I don't like it, and because I don't like playing these games. But a little bit, could I at different times in my life, I haven't ever done it to a degree that's really required something of me in a delayed gratification way or a dying to myself. Like, I don't want to play those games, so I don't. But would it take a degree of humility and self-sacrifice to play those games, to meet people where they're at in a way that, like, that's just the way the world is? And would that potentially be a better thing or a good thing or an okay thing? Yeah. So in a sense, have I been, you could argue, I mean, I can see this. Have I been lazy and selfish in not subjugating myself to like a more rigorous academic intellectualism, perhaps?
I think we all do it,
Yeah.
right? Like when there's the of the kind of suffering which good can come from it, but could potentially be avoidable. We can, to the practice cleaning our room, and not being lazy, such that we take responsibility as, networks of people. You make the sacrifice of here in a place so that perhaps you pursue some goal, some to help with the corruption against those who would wield power, without care. So but it takes a sacrifice. I like what we're doing though. I think sometimes I ask if what we're doing is selfish and lazy, and to a degree, it's like this is kind of a low hanging fruit kind of thing where we practice, or for me, I get to practice listening and trying to love the people that are here, and it doesn't come easy or naturally from me, and so that's good, and it's a good foundation. It's a good foundation for. So it's not too hard, and it's a good foundation. But I think it's like walking through some door. I think there's other rooms you can walk through, more doors. Oh, more doors. That's a.
Yeah. Well, and I don't know. And part of it is probably just a discernment of your gifting to some degree. Like, I'm not I don't know. The more academia has always felt like a trying to fit yourself. It's like me trying to fit a square peg into a round hole or something. I did consider for a while going back to school for philosophy, but like oh man, what it felt like to me was like what always drove me crazy in kind of my intellectual or quasi-intellectual evangelical church culture. It just felt like I would enter into that same kind of a thing just within like academic philosophy. And because I don't think most of the people, I don't know, are there people within academic philosophy that are like truly pursuing philosophy in a kind of Socratic way, or like what John Vervaeke talks about, where they're just trying to be true, like philosopher kings, and have applied wisdom in their life to like make the world a better place? I doubt it. I don't think there's that many of them there, probably, or else I just think the whole thing would be a lot different. And then I think, man, if I went to a school, and maybe could I find a school that did it, but like it's all complicated for like specific life reasons within my family and my marriage, and so at the end of the day, I just decided like that's just not. It was kind of like before you go to build a tower, count the cost. Like I've done that before. When I was younger and got all fired up and like this intellectual awakening happened, I was all fired up reading like Grudem's Systematic Theology. I was like, I need to go back to seminary. Like I got to become a pastor. And I went to Bethel Seminary in Minneapolis here for about a month. until I like started taking classes, and like that was more of my fundamentalist phase. And I remember taking classes, and like all of a sudden I had this realization. I mean, I don't know. I'd think about it much differently now, but I remember having the idea of like, oh, these people don't even like believe the Bible. It's just like, what am I doing? And so then I don't know, but like that was a very not count the cost, expensive excursion. You know?
I think the issue, like what you're describing in academic philosophy and stuff, is so often it's not like this uh, sort of pure pursuit of truth. There's
Mhm.
always like an agenda to it. You got to build a bridge to get over here. There's always like a predetermined telos to the thing. And is it cool if I share a quote real quick?
Yeah.
There's a cool quote in here. Philosophy lives in words, but truth and fact well up into our lives in ways that exceed verbal formulation. There is in the living act of perception always something that glimmers and twinkles and will not be caught, and for which reflection comes too late. No one knows this as well as the philosopher. He must fire his volley of new vocables out of his conceptual shotgun, for his profession condemns him to this industry. But he secretly knows the hollowness and irrelevancy. His formulas are like stereoscopic or kinetoscopic photographs seen outside the instrument. They lack the depth, the motion, the vitality. In the religious sphere in particular, belief that formulas are true can never wholly take the place of personal experience.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I agree. That's very, it's like, that's why I love these. It's like that. You guys ever seen that Pixar movie Brave? I don't know if you got little
Yeah,
kids.
15 times.
Yeah.
But
it's like
I actually asked the kids to watch it with me, and they don't want to watch it anymore.
Oh, really?
I like Brave.
But yeah, it's got like the wisps, or it's like the muse that's moving out through the woods that you like pops up here and you chase it and then it moves, pops up over there and you chase it and it moves. Or like Sam Tiedemann just released his video with Moises about Harry Potter. What's the gold
The
thing? That's
snitch.
Quidditch snitch. Yeah. It's like all the same, like Peterson's talked about that too, the snitch, riffing on Harry Potter and what she was trying to get at in that. It's this thing that moves you that is, it's like that Clem Snyder lyric, God is that which lies forever just beyond the limit of what we already seem to know. Except I think also, this is where I would push into it more with like the Maximus and radical kind of incarnational theology, which I think came up. This is a shout out to Ken Lowry and Climbing Mount Sophia when, because he just got an interview with Jordan Hall. I don't know if you guys saw that, but Jordan Hall is he's so hot now. Like this really smart Vervaeke guy that just people can barely track with, who now all of a sudden has become a self-identifying Christian. And so everybody's just like trying to get him on and talk to him about it. But shoot, what was he talking about? I lost my own thread. Wisps, the Muse.
You went to Jordan Hall after that.
I did. Oh
yeah, and before that, you were the snitch. Yeah.
I don't know. I lost it. Dang it. Sorry.
Just sort of chasing the logos and it pops up here and there and you lose it and find it again.
The radical incarnation thing is like, yeah, because it's always just beyond what you already seem to know, but it's also present in, I mean, in what you think you know, but it's present in everything. It's everywhere present, filling all things. It's not like God is only out there, like forever beyond your grasp. He's also in your grasp.
Yeah, but the golden snitch, I've tried to think about that. Is there a character in the story that was the golden snitch? And then, maybe there's a golden snitch within us as well, but it's like, was Snape the golden snitch?
Yeah.
So it's like, but yeah, that's what comes to mind when you say that.
Here is Grog the Sam Harris of TLC? Maybe. I love having Grog here, and it's fantastic. It's good for me because oh my God, I hate apologetics conversations so much. Like and it can feel like you get into because that's part of it. That's a big thing. That's why I love Chad. And even like it came up in a Grail Country conversation the other day. Sherry was in here in the comments saying like this is going to devolve into like Christian apologetics pretty soon. And I don't like those conversations. I don't, but I need to learn again to see the value.
Does Christian apologetics work?
Well,
Like, have you seen it? Have you seen it at work? I wonder if anyone has a testimony where the apologetics worked for them. Like they encountered apologetics and then bam, that's what, I don't know.
Yes, I think it does in that sense. It's kind of like what you were saying earlier. Like there's certain modes and times where like this church may be what you need, but it's maybe not the church I would advocate as like the best church, but whatever. The best church is whatever you need to get you toward the goal, I would say, of like what you're supposed to be.
That's what I wanted to respond to T-Grog to the point about the charismatic churches. It's like, I think there's apologetics. There's a form of apologetics where you try to prove that the Bible is true, where it just won't work for some types of people, or maybe it's just that person where they're at that time.
Right.
And similarly, like even if the charismatic church was going to be the most popular church, it's like it's not going to work for everyone. Like there's not going to be this thing that works for all people at all times. It's like we're all born babies, you know.
Right. And then anytime you want to absolutize it, because I would say the same thing with like street evangelism. I was really into street evangelism for a while, if you can believe it. Somebody that's hyper extroverted.
I want a video. I want some video footage of your street evangelism.
I've maybe talked about this before. I don't know. I had this buddy who's an Alaskan halibut fisherman that I met at Bethlehem Baptist Church, John Piper's church in Minneapolis. And I met him and his wife at like a 20-somethings group because we were trying to connect because it was a great big church. And he and his wife were on their honeymoon because they came to Minneapolis and got an apartment across the street from Bethlehem Baptist Church for their honeymoon so they could go to John Piper's church. Like this is the kind of, that's like Piper culture for sure. Like, I don't know, they're fans of John Piper. And so I met this guy. He had WDJD tattooed, like why did Jesus die, tattooed on both hands. And he'd always wear hoodies. And so he'd like walk around and you could always see his hands. And I would do street evangelism with this guy. Like we used to like watch Way of the Master videos together. So like Kirk Cameron and Ray Comfort, if you guys know who that is. Kirk Cameron's like the Left Behind dude who was on whatever that TV show in the 80s or 90s, whatever it was.
I read those books.
Yeah, I read a lot of them. I think I read almost all of them.
I read all of them.
Yeah. And so we go out doing street evangelism all the time. And so all that to circle back is say, like, is street evangelism good or does it work? I think I often think of these things in terms of like exceptions and rules. Like I would say broadly, on the whole, street evangelism is not a good thing. Like I don't think it's making genuine Christians or awakening people to things they didn't see. I think what most people think of with street evangelism is like the guy on the corner with the sign saying like the end is near. They're like, you're a crazy person. Like, leave me alone. I want to go about my day. Like you're not going to tell me anything I haven't heard before. But sometimes, Christ plays even in Antichrist.
Dropping bombs. It's not good as a whole. Drop the bomb.
I mean, it works sometimes. I think Christians, there's been genuine conversions from street evangelism,
Hey, Teo.
What up, Teo?
Yeah, just come on real quick to say that street evangelism, apologetics does work for some people. And it's a powerful thing. It's a powerful tool. And it's also not just for turning Christians into non-Christians into Christians, but also for helping to strengthen new Christians' faith so they can go deeper into like understanding the faith. Apologetics is extremely useful for that. And for the evangelism, yes, look at how Haiti was there collecting, trying to use the Ray Comfort method of street evangelism. Right there with you, bro. But I do also see what you're saying. It can't be the total evangelism package that Christianity has to offer. We can do like the personal evangelism works best, in my opinion, but we also can't throw away the apologetic section.
Yeah. Because I would say at the end of the day, the thing that's going to convert people is Christ in me or Christ in you. So like if there's somebody out doing street evangelism, and through that medium, yeah, I mean, whatever, we think we're just spitting out truths about Christianity and the world, which sure, you're doing that. But the thing that's going to actually break through is the personal love that someone feels through that. People are converted by seeing Christ, because I am the truth. And if that manifests in you through doing apologetics, people will become Christians. You know, I mean, that's the way I see it. But it's not like that's not an apologetic for apologetics in and of itself, I would say.
So one thing that's really captured my mind, in the book of Job, Elihu is one of the most fascinating characters in the Bible to me. And, he says if there's 1 in 1,000, then he can, sort of pull someone who's in the pit out of the pit and restore them. I'm wondering, what about the other 999? I'm thinking about like seeds in the desert, and then the 1,000th one is the storm that comes in, and all of a sudden, all those other seeds have the conditions just right to pop up.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe all this apologetics and evangelism is kind of like planting those seeds that are just waiting on the right conditions to sort of spring up.
Yeah, I would say if it's done in the best way you could do it,
What does that look like, the best way you can do it?
Humbly, probably. Not like, because I don't know. I just like.
Sorry, I'll let you finish your thought.
Well, I don't know. It's half baked. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think I'm with Mills. There's even the ones that aren't done well, the haphazardly done apologetics, I think those can still serve as some kind of seeds just spreading, and the soil is more determined of, like, the person has more to say about whether it's going to germinate or not. So
Yeah.
I think that even badly done apologetics can be effective.
No, right. Yeah. I mean, that makes total sense for me, because I don't know. I think God's working through everything. So like good or bad or anything. And so, and people are going to do what they're going to do, like when I don't go out doing street evangelism now, but I don't think I was I'm just a different person than I was then. But like when I was doing it then, I was doing it in earnest and because I love people. So, yeah, here you go. Chezi, exactly. Not pulling one by the hand, rather speaking to the heart. Yeah, planting seeds. Well said. So.
Oh, I love answer, man.
Where's he at? Here we go. This guy? We preach Christ crucified, not ourselves. And faith comes by hearing God's words. Yes. I became a Christian through him. See, I mean, that's just like the ways. Here's a very Chad statement. The ways that people become a Christian are about as wide as there are people.
Yep.
That's how it works. Mills. See you, buddy. Sherry said you should watch their video on Elihu on Jess channel. Their stuff's solid, so
Definitely. Thanks.
Yeah, see you later, buddy. I'm gonna go read through some of these comments, and I'm
gonna head out as well. See you.
All right, see you later, Tyler.
Is it the time to bail out?
It's getting close. Yeah, are you feeling it already? I think it's probably a good.
Yeah, it feels good.
It's probably a good closing out spot. I don't know. I didn't quite I probably didn't say exactly what I wanted to say perfectly, but I never do. So that's right on brand.
It's interesting that you are both for confessionalism and against confessionalism. It depends on what you mean by confessionalism.
Yeah, I'm all about the kind of confessing, which is confessing your sins to one another that you may be
Right.
healed.
Right.
That kind of thing. Will I be at Estuary? Yes, I will. All right.
All right.
Garth,
Good to see you, Luke.
here, buddy. And thanks for coming in, Gavin, and we'll see you all later. Peace out.